Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the United Kingdom United Kingdom Alumni Chapter Mental Health Awareness event. Tonight's event is hosted by us, the United Kingdom Alumni Chapter, as well as our co-host this evening is Chi Mu Mu Chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We also have our expert panelist here with us this evening that will be able to take us through a deeper dive and help us understand what we are dealing with in this current environment. And is also aimed to promote awareness and to reduce the stigma. And it helps to encourage seeking the behavior for mental health. So we ask you to get prepared to ask your questions, share your reactions, raise your hand. You can see the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and type any pre-questions that you may have. Our panelists will be able to see them, and we will get to those as soon as we can. So go ahead and put your questions into the chat. We thank you all for joining us today. And again, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but my name is Tanya Burris-Holmes, and I'm the president of the United Kingdom Alumni Chapter. And a little bit about DST, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, before I hand it over to our expert panelist. We are a public service organization, and we have over 350,000 women globally in this organization. And within this organization, we promote and we support this global initiative of mental health awareness. So again, we welcome you. We thank you for joining. And at this time, I will turn it over to Rob Taylor, president of Omega Psi-Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And thank you all again. Have a great evening and a good conversation.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. My name is Robert Taylor, and I have the honor of serving as the bossless of the Chi Mu Mu chapter of Omega Psi-Phi Fraternity Incorporated. On behalf of our chapter, I want to sincerely thank each of you for joining us for the first annual mental health event held in collaboration with the United Kingdom Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Chartered on April 17, 2012 in Birmingham, United Kingdom, the Chi Mu Mu chapter proudly serves the communities of Birmingham, London, and the RAF Lakenheath military area. Mental health challenges in the Black community are often intensified by systemic racism, historical trauma, and disparities in access to care. Many individuals continue to face stressors such as microaggression, police brutality, and economic hardship, all of which can severely impact mental well-being. Compounding this is the persistent stigma surrounding mental health, which too often discourages those in need from seeking support. Now more than ever, we must come together to raise awareness, promote healing, and support one another. I also invite you to join us for our upcoming annual health fair on 7 June at the Whitgift Center in Croydon. The event will feature a diverse group of vendors, and representatives including the British Red Cross, NHS professionals, local gym owners, doctors providing information on prostate cancer, and mental health experts. Thank you again for being part of this important conversation. With that, I turn it over to tonight's moderator.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bacillus Rob Taylor. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining us. Good evening and welcome to the Stronger Minds, Stronger Communities webinar. Again, as mentioned earlier, hosted by the United Kingdom Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and Chi Mu Mu Chapter of Omega Psi-Phi. We are extremely pleased to have you all here today. And my name is Nima Sheshi. I am a member of the United Kingdom Alumni Chapter. And again, we just want to thank you. And the main reason that we are here, before we get on to the main reason that we're here today, we just have a few announcements to make sure that you are aware of what's going on. I have shared my screen, so just give me a minute to do that so you can see what's going on in terms of that part. So just a few housekeepings before we do start. In the first instance, feel free to take notes, write down any questions. All questions can be placed in the Q&A section of Zoom. And please actively engage. Although your mics and your videos are off, we would still love to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and interact and share an emoji when you feel like something resonates with you. We do want to still hear from you. And then the webinar will be recorded and available online afterwards. So in joining, you are giving your consent to be part of the recording. Again, follow us online. You have our social media handles right there at the bottom. And we're about to go ahead and start. But before that, another announcement. We hope that you are, so just an emergency announcement that we make regularly for our events protocol. So we We hope that you are healthy and safe in your own places and spaces during this virtual event. However, as with any location in which we meet, whether it be in our own homes for virtual events or physically in some other venue, we must always be prepared. Please identify 2 exits in your current location. We must always be assured that there are at least 2 exits available to us in case of the need for an emergency evacuation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just get cracking. And I'm going to first of all give an introduction to our amazing panelists that we have with us this evening. So first up, I have Darlington Zionere. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yes, okay, thank you. He is an accredited therapeutic counselor, clinical supervisor, and consultant with over 20 years of experience in mental health, specializing in governance, service improvement, and culturally competent care. He's also an advocate with Black Minds Matter UK. Thank you again so much for supporting and being with us today. Championing access to culturally appropriate therapy and systemic change in mental health services. Next, we have Dr. Johnny Moore. Dr. Johnny Moore is a licensed clinical social worker with a doctorate in social work and extensive experience in school counseling, suicide prevention, and child welfare. She currently serves as a high school counselor at the American School in London and is a returned Peace Corps volunteer and a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Next, we have Dr. Julian Vives, correct? Okay, Dr. Julian Vives is a clinical psychologist licensed in both the UK and the US, serving as lead clinical psychologist at Elysium Healthcare and a consultant in psychological assessment. His work spans trauma, schizophrenia, telehealth innovation, and support for military communities, with affiliations to the APA and BPS, and he's also a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Let's please give a warm welcome to our panelists, everyone, please. You can go ahead and interact as you like. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I want you to focus on our speakers for the rest of it. Okay, I see somebody has raised their hand, so I will take that as acknowledgement as appreciating the speakers. Thank you so much. So, first of all, I'm going to go along with the first question I have is just so we can start off on the same page with everybody. I always like to go on with a common denominator of sorts, or definition rather. Is just to start us off, can each of you share what the word community means to you in the context of mental health and why you think conversations around mental health can be especially challenging in our communities?
Shall I start or can anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. So in terms of community and in the mental health aspects of things, a community we refer to as a network of individuals who come together to provide support and understanding to each other and create a safe space of belonging. Now, some of the issues regarding the challenges about the conversations around mental health, mainly due to stigma and lack of awareness, and sometimes cultural misconceptions regarding mental health, and many communities may not want to prioritize, again, sometimes mental health education due to misunderstandings and resistance in discussing personal issues openly.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you, Darlington. Julian, I see that you've.
Okay.
Would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you again for the warm welcome. Yeah, when I think about community, I would say I think about community should be akin to vitality. Yeah, being able to not only have a safe space to be in, but a space that can bring life into you. Because it's very easy to, and we've become so accustomed to, yeah, we can sit and talk to people. We'll have people within our community, right, our family that we go to, but are we really feeling safe? With them, and are they breathing life into us? Are we breathing life into them? So that's what I define it within the context of mental health.
Thank you, and Janice.
Yeah, I just want to add that For me, it means support and connection and just collective healing overall. It's creating safe spaces, like the gentleman said before me, where people can feel seen and heard without judgment. In many Black and Brown communities, mental health discussions are often layered, as previously suggested, with stigma, generational trauma, and cultural expectations. And admitting you're struggling can be misinterpreted in our communities as weakness or dishonor, especially when resilience is seen as survival. So that makes opening up difficult, and many suffer in silence instead of seeking help. So those are some of the barriers or challenges in our communities.
Thank you. Those definitions are great, and I think they segue really nicely. I really appreciate you guys defining what community is and like how it's pretty much a stigma. So the next thing, or how rather communities relate to mental health. So the next question I had was how we often hear the terms good and poor mental health, but what do those actually look like in real life? Can you share some examples on what good and poor mental health looks like, and what are some signs? The second part is, what are some signs people can look out for in themselves or in loved ones that might indicate that they need support? So Dr. Johnny, I think your hand is raised.
Yes. So good mental health doesn't mean you're happy all the time. So we're not always happy. It means you can cope with life's challenges, form healthy relationships, and bounce back from setbacks. Signs might include emotional balance, motivation, and the ability to manage stress. Quote unquote, poor mental health might look like constant fatigue, irritability, withdrawing from loved ones, or changes in eating and sleeping habits. For instance, if someone seems overwhelmed for weeks, talks about feeling hopeless or just not themselves, those are signs to check in with them and maybe with a professional.
Thank you so much. That's a great summary. So ultimately, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's like paying attention to like those little subtle signs of people, right? To see if whether they're in good or poor mental health.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Darlington or Julian, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I mean, just to echo the same sentiments, really, when it comes to good mental health, we're looking at resilience. How are you coping, on a day-to-day, our ability to perform under stress, and other things that we experience on a day-to-day. So, for example, we all feel anxious, we all get depressed, so, on a day-to-day basis. But are we able to cope with that? Being able to cope with that is a sign of good mental health. When we then fail to cope with those pressures, so for example, we start getting anxiety, will be now coined general anxiety disorder or clinical depression. That's when now the mental health is going towards the poor side of it. And again, the symptoms, withdrawals, most probably lack of sleep, difficulty concentration, and most probably not even going for social interactions and activities, changes in behavior and mood swings, can be one of those signs and symptoms, indicating that there is poor mental health.
Thank you. Those were extremely poignant examples that I think everyone can probably like self-reflect and be like, I can see that even in just everyday conversation. Personally, you're saying things like lack of sleep. Sometimes you might joke and people might say, oh, I'm not getting enough sleep. And thank you. That's really, really poignant. Thank you. Julian, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And the other panelists mentioned so many things, about what to look out for, changes. I completely agree. Some of the things that I think in terms of poor mental health or uh, things that we should look out in life is how are things at work? How are things with kind of your life? And if you're living a value-driven life, right? Like, what are you feeling within yourself? And what do you see going on in your community? Who you're associating with? Who's associating with you? And those are some other ways to think about, I think, poor mental health, because those really contribute to it. And what is good mental health? Yes, of course, coping with things, being able to take skills that you've learned and succeed in life, right? Being able to teach other people, or even just being able to do one or two good things a day that bring you some type of overall peace and happiness, and sense of knowing that you've done something. So that's it. I think that's what some other ways I would look at poor and good mental health.
Thank you very much for giving those good examples as well. So that's a nice way to balance the list of how we're making sure that we're also leaning into what I assume is leaning into good mental health. The next question I have, because I know we're already getting questions in the Q&A, people, please do go ahead and ask those questions. That makes me happy that there's engagement. We love engagement at our events. So before we get into those though, just two more questions. The next question is, mental health can still be a taboo topic, as mentioned already in many of our communities. Why do you think Black, Brown, and Asian people often struggle to speak openly about mental health, especially compared to our white counterparts? If you could also just mention maybe what cultural, historical, or systemic factors you think might play into that silence. One thing I did want to add though, before I go into you guys answering, is that I'm conscious that we have people attending that are based in the UK and people who are also across the pond in the States, and might even also be in other places like mainland Europe. So please raise your hand or react in some way if you are outside of the UK, and we'll make sure that we also include that in our responses. But yes, first of all, I see a few people have reacted. So just to note, we definitely have people outside the UK with us. Thank you so much for coming, keeping in mind time difference and everything. So Dr. Janice, I'll go with you first, please.
Awesome, thank you. So there are several reasons, right? So many are rooted in cultural, historical, and systemic realities. So historically, many of our communities have faced oppression, colonization, or migration trauma. And we've often been told to keep our heads down and keep going, right? But mental health wasn't prioritized because survival was. So culturally, some of us are raised to value family, honor, silence, or prayer over therapy. Systemically, lack of access to culturally competent care, as my counterparts mentioned earlier, and representation in the mental health field adds to mistrust. So when you don't see yourself in the system as a clinician, psychotherapist, psychologist, it's harder to trust it, right? So that silence isn't about lack of care. It's often about fear, shame, or not knowing where to start.
Whoa, those were a lot of, I feel like those are quite heavy hitters that we could definitely delve into and have such a long conversation about. But yeah, let me let other panelists also answer. Darlington, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better than what was said. Just looking, I suppose, in a sense, when you're looking at the other cultural factors, disbelief comes into play, where the cultures are more kind of like prioritize personal strength and resilience over vulnerability. Now, when those factors come into play, if I'm going to say I am not feeling okay mentally, one is considered to be vulnerable, and therefore you start hearing men up, check it off, walk and do all these things. So it's not as much prioritized, which can become a barrier on its own. And historically, again, we're looking at sometimes our experiences, that we have when we actually say we are not well mentally, that then affects the way that we're going to be moving on forward, or whether it's seeking help or anything like that. And this one links up again with the systemic factors, in the sense that where again a system that where there's less representation, it becomes very difficult for people to have an understanding. Now here, Black Minds Matter, what we do is try and work in a very culturally competent way, so that we show that we understand the person before we're, more than trying to investigate the problem. What we find is a lot of people who come over, they end up saying, I didn't have to explain who I am as a person. I just had to talk about my problem. So you can imagine, where we've got limited resources. In therapy, what was happening, or what usually people say, is we spend half of those trying to explain who I am. And then by the time when we're about to finish, that's when we're starting to get into the issues. And then I'm told that, there's no more. So by being culturally competent is trying to work again and eradicate some of those stigmas, and give people a safer place where they feel understood and heard, and where there's familiarity.
I absolutely love that response, and also obviously absolutely love the work that Black Minds Matter is doing in terms of making sure that people can feel safe in like getting mental health services by way of people that are culturally competent. So I think that's an extremely important point that we'll definitely come and circle back to. But Julian, you next, and then I'll like come back with the follow-up question.
Yeah, no. Some of the, in addition to what was said, some of the other things is just not knowing how. I think many people, the Black, Brown, Asian community, don't know how to ask for help. As we stated before, there are so many cultural implications depending on where you're from. Asking for help could be a negative thing, a sign of weakness. We just don't do that, right? It can be a norm that's done. So asking for help and knowing how to do that is, I think, a big barrier. Another thing that was mentioned too is what type of care are you receiving? So having worked in both healthcare systems now, in the US, of course, by and large, everything is with insurance, but it seems that there seems to be, in my opinion, a lot more access to mental health and ongoing care, whereas here in the UK, understandably so, when there's universal health care, things are very time limited, but I think that it can be a bit too rigid, right? And just as Darlington was saying before, right before you explain, right, like explain who you are, and right when you're about to get into the mix of things, there are no more sessions. And then you're on a waiting list for such a long time. So that disappointment too, that disappointment of not being able to utilize services, I think it serves as another barrier.
Thank you. That's a really good point in terms of like comparing. Thank you so much, Julian, for comparing the US and the UK in terms of services, especially in these times where we are seeing tighter belts, if we will, to be as diplomatic as possible. But like basically it's hard. The accessibility to mental health services seems to be becoming a lot a lot harder and just difficult for people to get on. There was already long waiting lists before COVID. I know in the UK, I know of people talking of how long they were waiting on lists, talk less of post-COVID. And I'm not sure, I know different structures in the States as well. So please feel free to come in and like explain a bit more on that as well. But one thing I did want to ask, because from what you've mentioned about the difficulty of having that cultural competency, maybe one thing I'd like to ask is what could people do if they want to, well, this actually kind of goes on to the next question, so I'll pause on that. The next question, I'll come back to that actually. So the one question I wanted to ask Darlington to follow up though was, can you share the bottlenecks that Black Minds Matter for those, especially in the UK, and even in the States, just to be aware how you have navigated the system within a predominantly white country, because especially in terms of demographics, the UK Black and brown people are even smaller demographic, percentage. So could you just share the bottlenecks you've experienced and how you ensure people are able to, again, navigate the industry further properly? I know you've mentioned about the cultural competency of like therapists, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think some of the main issues that when we first started is again trying to get people to understand that you do not have to have something wrong to go into therapy, because people sometimes feel like you only go to therapy when there's something wrong, or therapy is only, I mean, for lack of a better term, the generalized term is you have something wrong with you to go into therapy, you're crazy, or things like that, some of those generalized terms. So we had to do some work around, awareness, which is one of our pillars. What is it? What is therapy? Who can go to therapy? How is it accessible? And what does it mean? So we had to be very innovative and come up with a very robust assessment kind of like framework where we get to actually sit down with somebody and ask them if they're presenting issues, what is it that's going on, and then we have a matching process whereby we will then, from the recommendations from the assessor, we can match them with the right therapist. So those were some of the things that we decided to do, because what was happening were people would say, oh, I'm just being told, from this list of therapists, choose a therapist. So people were not engaging, or people would just, oh, I just want to try this. But then there was that sort of like the difficulties that are involved. And when we're looking at the Black community in the UK, there's a lot of also people I suppose the diasporian community, where language also plays quite a huge key. Language is in language barriers. So we decided to have to work with the associate therapists. So we've got a huge list of associate therapists who come from all over the world, I can say, and who are also from our community. And this has made us, or rather put us in a really good position in the sense that during the assessment period, we can actually ask for choices, in terms of language, in terms of, I can give you, for example, whether they want to work with a male or female, or there's one case that I always say where it actually brought really good joy to me, where the client, she she's got autism and had seen so many different therapists and it didn't work. So when she came to us, we were lucky enough that we actually have also about 2 therapists who are autistic or non-autistic. And when we did that matching, it was like a house on fire. She came back saying, "Do you know what? I have been understood. Somebody knows how I speak and understand the language that I speak." And it really went well. So it's trying to flesh out some of those bottlenecks and also just, pushing on forward. I mean, for us, we do not get any grants from the government. We are purely funded by donations. So that's another area where the amount of people that will be coming wanting therapy from us and the resources are limited. So it's about always trying to be creative in how we self-fund or how we get other people to fund this way they call. So it's to do with just the nuances of the systems again that are around and the amount of people that are coming through. And sometimes we even get referrals from GPs, which we just go like that's a bit ironic because you guys have got the pot for that and we actually don't because it's really donation. So it's in that way we're just trying to work in a way that everybody feels ahead and understood. And we work really closely with our clients where we put out, surveys trying to find out what do they need. Rather than being reactive, we want to be responsive, to what our community is going through.
Thank you so much. I really love the fact that you said with the matching in the first instance, because I didn't even, well, or as an individual, an independent person that personally finance or would have to personally finance maybe therapy or people that might have to use insurance or whatnot, that does to end up using their money, right? So it does seem like such a much more efficient process and system to work towards. And since you guys are dependent also on like donations, there'll be more information about Black Minds Matter at the end. But yes, like I love the fact that you guys are making sure that it works specifically for our communities and people so they can get exactly what they need out of it without having to go through so many therapists. Because I know quite a few people tend to go through a lot of therapists to find the match. So that's good to know that you're literally cutting time in half for people to get to the core of the matter and resolve whatever they want to get to. So my final question, we're gonna, after this question, we're then gonna go out to the Q&A. So if people continue asking your questions, I see them, I love them, keep them coming. So the final question before we go to Q&A is, for those who are ready to start their mental health journey, we've kind of touched on this already, or want to support someone else, what are some of the resources out there that people can turn to? So we already know amazing Black Minds Matter in the UK, but please feel free to flesh out some more. But could you also touch on the different types of therapy, mental health? There's something that I was recently just made aware of, thanks to Julian, which is mental health first aid, and the kind of support organizations like Black Minds Matter UK offer. So I'll first of all go to Dr. Jonice.
Thank you. So shout out to Black Minds Matter UK. I'm recently moved here about 18 months ago. So that's a new resource for me that I readily use. Similarly, Taraki, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, supports South Asian mental health. And Mind, Samaritans, and Rethink Mental Illness offer broader national services. So there's some, I'm going to talk about 4 types of therapy that I clinically endorse. So it's called CBT, which is often heard of readily in the communities. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, and it helps with managing thoughts and behavior. So that's something that you need assistance with. That will be a go-to modality of therapeutic intervention. Psychodynamic therapy explores past experiences and how they shape you today. So that's another modality or intervention. Group therapy offers shared experiences in a safe space. It's a group space. Trauma-informed therapy is the last one I'll speak on. Is especially important for people dealing with generational or racial trauma. Again, you mentioned Julian talked about mental health first aid. I was trained in the United States and just recently was trained here in the United Kingdom. So mental health first aid is another powerful tool. It teaches people how to support someone in crisis or distress before professional help arrives. So folks in the barbershop, folks at the beauty salon, folks at church can get this training and help their fellow counterparts. So think of it like CPR, but for mental well-being.
I love that. Thank you so much. Julian, do you want to expand on some of those as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so some of the other things I know that Shout is another texting 24/7 texting based service based in the UK that people can reach out to for assistance. And oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the number now, but there is a national number in the US similar to 911. I think it was 912 something. Don't take my word for it. I have to look for it. But please look for it in your own time as well. But there's a national number that you can call if you're in a crisis now, back in the States. So this happened last July. Um, in terms of what was the second part of the question? What is some advice that I would give people? Yeah. Um, I would say the biggest thing on both ends of the pond is just to know how to advocate for yourself, um, because there will be so many people that will tell you no or discredit the things that you're thinking and feeling. And it's an unfortunate reality of life that there's still, you know, this systemic racism exists. There will be people who are not culturally responsive and don't know how to address you. I'm not saying to tolerate that. I'm just saying it may come and still, you know, persist. Ask for help. If you see others struggling, right? Help them. Let's lift as we climb. Um, so those would be my takeaways from today.
I love that. I love that being persistent in wanting better mental health because that it is truly a journey to almost not only you, from my own personal experience and others that I know of, is not only are you trying to want to do better for yourself, it's fighting the voices outside externally that might
Yeah.
try and deter you and tell you, going back to what was said earlier from some of you, is like our community loves prayer and prayer is great, but we can pray and we can also seek help. But
Yes.
like sometimes you can, oh, yeah, so basically those two things. But before we go on to questions, Darlington, also please do share the support that people could do for themselves and for others, please.
Okay, so I think the other organization that's there is called TEG, the Empowerment Group. They provide a therapy, but on a concession, sort of like discounted prices, and they do it online. That's another good organization to go to as well. And again, each other. I would like to really emphasize that each other. It's important to encourage your community to be able to talk and understanding the different levels of talking and supporting each other. Sometimes talking might not necessarily that you've got the best advice, but just being there to listen and you don't even have to say anything, just being there for another person whilst they're floating, but then also understanding, you know, what your tolerances and capabilities are in terms of listening as well. Because what we don't want to do is to sip, you know, the mental health to keep on going. So when you there is no, I suppose in a sense, professional help available, that is something that, you know, I encourage people to do. Mental health first aid, again, really good. Sort of like a supposed facility when people get trained, they'll be able to support other people. One of the other things that we encourage people, especially when they get into a crisis, which I found that a lot of people are not aware of, you can actually go to the A&E and tell them that you do not feel safe, you know, and what they will do is if they are connected with the mental health department on site, they will refer you there. You actually go there and be assessed, you know, and then you get the support that you need. So especially for people that are feeling suicidal, I really advise them to, you know, go to any. It's not only just about the physical health, but it's also about the mental health. You can go there and speak to them and seek the support, you know, that you need. So yeah, and in terms of advice, it's okay not to be okay, you know. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to, there is power in actually putting your hands up and saying, hey, I need support, I need help. You know, there's so much power in that, there's so much strength in that. So it's about changing that narrative, you know, that we've been taught for far too long, that when you put your hands up, you know, you're weak. No, it's not a sign of weakness, because as we can see it now, the effects of it is weakness is when we can't say we need help, and then we are self-medicating on different things that will eventually most probably take us and cause a lot of issues. And it's important, you know, to put yourself first, because when you're okay, there is a ripple effect that happens. So, you know, when you throw a stone in the water, the ripples go out. So it then goes out to your family, to your friends, to your community. So, you know, put yourself first, take care of yourself. Self-care, very, very important. You know, and always remember, you do not have to have any problems to go into therapy. One of the key
It's a
things that
regular, right? It doesn't have to be a problem. Sorry, so sorry, because I know we have a lot of questions. I don't want to go over them,
that's
but there
okay.
was one thing I wanted to clarify, and please feel free to answer answer the question. But just to emphasize the A&E, you mentioned A&E is the emergent ambulance. It's
Accident and
A&E is the
emergency
emergency room,
departments.
the accident and emergency department. Thank you so much. Just to
Yes.
clarify,
That's
that's
the
what that
equivalence
is.
for emergency department, right?
Yeah, in the
The
US. Okay, yeah, I was like, let's make sure we're translating US terminology. But thank you so much.
That's
But yes, just wanted to say that. But yeah, we'll move on to questions because I see we've got quite a few and I want to get through as much as possible. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you to those that shared the number that Julian was referencing. So I've got 988 in the US, is that correct? Right,
sounds
perfect.
about
Thank you
right.
so much,
Thank you.
Tanja and Ricardo, for sharing that. So Ricardo also shared 211 for mental health issues and 988 for crisis counselors. Thank you. That is very helpful. And I hope that is also helpful for anyone that might be listening. Also, feel free to go ahead and responsibly Google and research. And I emphasize on responsibly because, you know, you have to be quite, careful when you are Googling. But yes. But the first question that I'm going to go with is from Tanji Morgan. It is, are there specific signs to watch for in men and women other than the general examples? I'm gonna hand
Okay.
that over to
I'll
okay,
take that
Julian.
one.
Yes, please. Mhm.
Yeah, so for men, I think some things to look out for is I guess the typical, change in mood, right? But you guys tend to take depression and turn it into anger. So when you see a man who tends to be a bit more irritable, on edge, things like that, those are some kind of covert signs of depression or some things that are really maybe weighing heavily on someone, and anxiety as well. Um, and yeah, people can be over functioning with depression and anxiety. So those are some other things in men and women that you'll see is people are kind of going a bit overboard. They're pushing themselves beyond their limits, and they know it, and you know it too. May feel that sense of wanting or needing to get things done. But yeah, I can go on forever, but I think those are some subtle things to look out for.
Thank you. Johnny, because you are also a woman on the panel, I was gonna give you a platform to also, if you wanted to share. Was
I like
anything to
what
add?
Dr. Julian was saying, just like we call it anxiety, like overreaching anxiety when you are just doing the most and you got your calendar full, you're committing to everything. And that's a source of some signs that you need to check in with your loved ones about their mental health. Being busy it's in our community seems like productivity, and we don't always have to be productive. We can always that's is resistance, is Trisha
Yes.
Hersey says and shares with us in her teachings that you don't always have to be busy, booked and busy. You can take some time. So when you do see those signs and symptoms in a loved one, then do a check-in and do a real check-in. When you ask someone how are they doing, have the time to do it. I know that in the UK people say, it's a quick in and out, but I'm from the South and we say, how are you doing? We really want to know. We want to sit down and unpack that with you. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you referencing rest is resilience because I do agree and definitely take seriously having downtime and making unserious business serious. So as I like to put it. But I'll go on to the next question, which is asking about what is the nexus between the Black community and poor mental health? I feel like we might have touched on this slightly before, but please, would Darlington, would that be something you want to, or Julian, I see that you've gone first.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I guess when it comes down to it is when we talk about that access um to it, what's the infrastructure looking like within Black and Brown communities, right? Where are the GP? So that's the uh the GP surgeries are the doctor's offices, right? So that's the UK equivalents. But where are they? Are they easily accessible to get to, right? What's the waiting list for these things? And I think it's important to remember that there's still to this day, with gentrification and everything in the UK and back in the States, that it plays such a big barrier for people getting the help that they need within the Black and Brown community. So um, if someone doesn't have the infrastructure of the basic needs being met, just stable housing, food, things like that, which still exist, um, to in a disproportionate manner within the Black and Brown community. Yeah, how do you expect anyone else to cope with life? So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that still remain in both, I guess, countries.
Thank you. That is really important, highlighting the structural issues. Thank you very much, Dr. Julian. I have the next question, which I feel might be a good one for you, Darlington, is does private insurance in the UK improve access to care? And that's from Ricardo.
I think to a certain degree it does. But then again, when we look in the Black community, like what we just the question before is about resources, whether someone can actually afford the private care. It's not very common here in the UK, but I would like to say that it's starting to become very common because people are complaining about, what's happening with the NHS being overstretched. A lot of people are starting to go into, private healthcare where you can actually also get, depending on the package that you choose, some of it actually comes with therapy, so a lot of people might not be aware of that, but that could be another way. But obviously you will get kind of like, there's always terms and conditions and fair use, of that area. So just be mindful of that. But it certainly does. The only thing now is when you're choosing private medical health, always ask about the package that do they offer culturally competent therapy or culturally competent, services that, will acknowledge you and understand where you're coming from, because sometimes they might say, yes, we'll offer you therapy, but it's not going to be cultural competence therapy, and you just have to go with whoever that they're going to refer you to. So it's just knowing your rights, or rather knowing what you need, and then making sure that when you're speaking either to your broker or if it's sorting that out, that those are going to be the key things that you would want to get out of your package.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. I did not know that about asking about the culturally competent provider. So I think that's a really great gem to take on. So another question is from Ashley. She asks, in our community, I'm gonna try and make sure we get all these questions. In our community, many younger people see and appreciate the value of mental health support and therapy. But as mentioned, older generations haven't accepted it just yet, have some of the most intense trauma, and would benefit so much. Any advice to persuade or help? Oh, this is a great question. Sorry. Help our parents, aunts, and uncles to look into it, or even just be open to it. Darlington, I know we had this conversation before, so please, let us know what would you think, and then I'll also open it up. Yes.
So what we're trying to do, actually, we opened up what we called Untold Stories for BMM, where we're encouraging the older generations to actually come up and start talking about their experiences. Because again, history comes with what it comes with in terms of what they have experienced. And some of them, believe it or not, might still be operating under survival, mode. So it's about having to give them those safe spaces rather, where they can actually engage and talk and understand that actually it's a good thing, to talk about, how I'm feeling, and also offering them therapy. So just by really encouraging them to kind of like join into certain podcasts and just listening to things, or even when going on walks, just talking about, how you're feeling. So we have been talking about modeling, the things that we need them to adopt, because when you sit down with the older generations, and try and tell them to say, oh, that's not going to happen. So sometimes they model, that, and if they see that actually there are changes, there are things that are happening, then they will most probably want to do the same. And, just different organizations encouraging this conversation to keep on going. So, for example, we are planning on talking about, using the word sorry, why people do not hear, or parents, from an older generation of grandparents, the word sorry doesn't come out as much as it should when something goes wrong, because what we're seeing is, when that happens, or when that doesn't happen, rather, it causes a lot of problems. So just keeping on engaging in those conversations, signposting them to different resources, even sometimes just leaving a booklet on the side, without actually saying, oh, can you read this? Because you'll be told, who are you to tell me what to do? So just putting it on the side, curiosity sometimes, kills the cat. Then they'll open up, they'll read up. Once information is given, sometimes it's very difficult for them not to learn that when they learn something new.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna have to go on to the next few questions, because we do have some other really good ones, but feel free to slide in your answer quickly in the other questions. But while we go to the next few questions, we do have a survey up. So hopefully you can see my screen. There is a code for Slido. So I'm going to do that while we're also answering the other questions, the last few questions. So you can just answer. There are 3 very quick questions that are going to take seconds. So easy peasy. So after this event, do you feel more informed about mental health? So the next question I want to ask that's come from the participants is, how can we address historical issues of pathologizing bias and Black folks subsequently being misdiagnosed by mental health professionals, leading in many cases to being sectioned? I think I'm going to go to Johnny's and then Julian, because I know, Julian, you have experience in this as well. Yes.
I just want to say that we don't want to discount our ancestors, our parents, grandparents, because mistrust in the mental health system or the healthcare system is real. Going back into the United States, it's Henrietta Lacks, where they, took her cells and duplicated those. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Black women are still dying at a higher rate. I think we are tougher and stronger than our white counterparts. So these things are real. They're continuously happening in our communities, and just being able to acknowledge that is going to be key and important. Can you repeat the second part of the question?
So I said, how can we address historical issues of pathologizing bias, the misdiagnosis by mental health professionals, leading in many cases to being sectioned?
And as our counterparts talked about, being connected with a culturally competent individual or psychotherapist, psychologist, mental health professional is going to be key into getting the right services. And just because someone is in alignment with you culturally, it's going to make a world of a difference. If there's things in my culture that is normalized, but in white culture or Asian culture, it's not, then we have to intervene and say, okay, this is a culturally competent thing and we're okay with this. This is not abuse or neglect. This is just what we do. We can look at it at a different angle and see if we can normalize it. But again, being culturally competent and aligned with a psychotherapist is going to be key.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to take the survey off screen for a minute, and we can come back to that in a few minutes.
I
But
wanted
the
to
next,
respond to that as
Julian,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I had to. I'll explode. I'm very passionate about this because we shouldn't not dismiss it, but it's nice to remember that, yeah, there still are so many issues within the system. And some advice that I would give is like, whatever spaces that you're occupying, to be able to push for wellness and well-being within those spaces, right? And if you're not in those spaces, get in them. Something that I'm passionate about is, education. So when part of my role at my current job, and I've been doing this for years now, is providing supervision. And when I provide supervision, I bring in the topic of culture and, how dynamic it can be, the importance it is, because that's something that I realized the UK system and, how they teach the students. And again, it's a different culture, different environment, but there is no main emphasis on bringing in culture into the therapy space. So it's at times it's ignorance. Now, is it excusable? I don't think so, but this is my experience. I just think it's just pure ignorance of not knowing. But occupying those spaces and being able to push for well-being at work, being able to tell your colleague, hey, there's a employee assistance program. If you don't have one, why not start something? So that would be the ways we can go about it.
Perfect, thank you. So a few more questions. So you can actually answer the questions on the back end. I'm just not sharing the screen. So we've gone on to the last question asking you other topics you'd be interested in regarding to mental health. So the last few questions are I'm going to try and kind of combine this, but I think this is a really good question from Nakuja about how do you combat cultural approach to mental health? I think we've kind of talked about this before. I'm going to merge this with another question that's come from Sharon asking, so Nakuja says, how do you combat cultural approach to mental health? For example, the difference between Afro-Caribbean, African-American, because as we know, for those in the UK and even outside of the UK, we have a lot of we have the obviously Black community, but we have a lot of subcultures within that. So yeah, basically, how do you combat the cultural approach? I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but please, who would like to go touch on that, highlight that a bit? And Sharon asks, just to tack on, so I think it's kind of two-ended. How do you find a therapist that meets your needs? So I think that's kind of the same question, but a bit different, but yes.
Yeah, if I'm understanding the question correctly, how do we combat those things? I think it's to find a common ground. I think even within this goes back to two questions ago about the older generations. How do we help? And I think tying it to what makes it important to you as their child, as their loved one or family member, because at the end of the day, they love you, they care for you. So figuring out clever ways to tie it back to yourself and saying things like it's important to me because, or when you do this, it makes me feel, and without having so much emotion or anything, but they can see that importance. I think that will mean a lot.
Okay, great. Oh, we have more questions coming up. Ooh, okay, so I'm gonna, if you can keep your answers real brief, I'm sorry, but I do want to get through them as quick. So maybe this kind of might have been answered. When seeking a therapist, which traits would you recommend looking for in a therapist in hoping of finding a good match? So any other than, yeah, when you're actually talking to a therapist, Darlington, would this be a good one for you? Are there any maybe two things maybe that you would say that people should look out for in terms of traits?
I think the first thing is we can talk from I suppose, compliance point to start with. Are they, do they have their qualifications? Because sometimes you get people who go and do online courses, like for a few weeks, and then they're calling themselves, therapists. So just make sure that they belong to an accredited or a body, that is recognized within the UK or even in the US. And then when you are speaking with the therapist, before you actually get into therapy, be ready for therapy. Be your own advocate. Have an understanding of the different approaches that are there and what they mean. Because by you understanding those approaches, you can find your way around, what it is that you want to get out of therapy. So it's again, having a therapist who is consistent, who sets boundaries. Boundaries are quite key when somebody's getting into therapy. If they're not turning up on time, then that's not a good therapist. If they're keeping on changing things, then that's not a good therapist. Again, somebody who's most probably going to be talking about themselves rather than you. It's some of those things to look out for, because therapy is about you, the individual, and
Yeah.
not about the therapist.
Yep. Perfect. So boundaries and competencies, those are the two things. So from the next question I have is, I see Damon has raised his hand, so I'm going to prioritize your question. Can you speak to the experience of derealization, specifically how it manifests and what therapeutic approaches are most effective in helping someone feel grounded and connected to reality again? Oh, that's a really powerful and good question.
Yeah, no, that typically it sounds like, derealization tends to happen when there's really stressful events, depending on what that is to someone. And I think some things to think about are the question was about how do we become grounded, and maybe regulate our emotions. So DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, they have some really great emotional regulation skills, and you can find them online. I would, of course, ask people to be guided by a therapist, but nonetheless, these are still coping mechanisms that you can have. Also, some modalities like acceptance and commitment therapy, so ACT, they incorporate not only CBT principles, right, the cognitive behavioral therapy principles, and it incorporates a sense of mindfulness, so being more thoughtful about the here and now. So those are some things to think about, to ground you, bring you back to the here and now, and to learn to really regulate yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take the last question. But before that, there was one question that asked, at what point do you seek help? It's never too early. You can go today. Like, I'm sure all the panelists, definitely let me know if you, okay, everyone's
When you
nodding.
have
So
the thought,
yeah, the
go.
thought, exactly. Like
Mhm.
you had the thought, it's that now is the time. But Ponis has said from the USA, lots of basic. So this is the last question, everybody. Lots of basic programs, food, clothing, housing, are being terminated due to the current administration, and subsequently causing mental health issues to evolve. This is true when this is affecting survival needs. What can the mass of people do? So frustrating for everyone, especially Black and Brown. And I hear that we are disproportionately impacted by these changes. Does anyone want to, happy to take that up? Julian or Janice?
I'll go again. Yeah, I was saying this before. What we can do, the people who are more fortunate, to be able to do more, move around a bit more, have more allowances, to do something, to occupy spaces, so that we can fight these injustices. Because the reason why, and this goes for the UK as well, the reason why we aren't getting those same allowances as everyone is the representation. And unfortunately, we have to. Uh, the door is not going to be open for us. We're going to have to kick it down. So it takes us, and this is why I speak for myself and for my counterparts that are here. We're so passionate about these things, and I hope that our enthusiasm can leak over to do whatever it is you can do, even if it's an hour webinar with someone. But occupy those spaces.
Perfect. Thank you so much. There were so many gems. I'm going to quickly wrap up. I know it is 8 on the dot. But I'm just going to quickly say the ones that really broke out to me was being able to cope well in stress. The resilience. Resilience came up quite a lot. And I think being persistent, what I liked about what Julian said about being persistent in wanting better mental health. So being persistent in that. So let's reshape the resilience into that whole persistence of, wanting better for yourself. And then also asking for culturally competent therapists or like mental health. That's really important too. And then I think just paying attention to the subtle signs. So I was trying to pick one from each panelist, but I really think that was important. Just making sure that we are subtle signs to other people, but even ourselves. I think sometimes we forget to be reflective. So yes, those are the 3 main ones, but please let me know if there's anything else. Thank you all so much for joining us. I know that felt like Speedy Gonzales and I was trying to rush through the ends, but I appreciate you so much great engagement. We really appreciate you taking your time out today, whether it's dinner, lunchtime, or morning, wherever you are. We appreciate you. And thank you to our speakers. You are absolutely amazing, impactful, great insight. So much that I've learned today. I didn't know you could go to the A&E and basically say you are not okay and basically expedite yourself getting that help. Remember that, everybody. We will send an email with a quick summary of some of the tidbits as well. But please feel free to subscribe to the UKAC newsletter for updates on upcoming events and learn more about Black Minds Matter UK. So we've put those up on the screen, so please feel free to do that. And let me just make sure that I'm not forgetting to thank anybody else, because yes, home training. Yeah, again, thank you. A big thank you to our speakers for your expertise. A big special thank you to Black Minds Matter UK because of your continued collaboration over the last 2 years and impactful work that you are doing for the community, and your partnership is deeply valued. We hope everyone left with something valuable, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Stay in touch. You take care, everybody. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.